Hello and welcome to a chat with Walaber. He is the developer of JellyCar Worlds and the entire JellyCar franchise, and that's probably what we'll be mainly chatting about. But he also has a very long history as a game dev and as an indie game dev, so we'll touch on a lot more as well, probably. But yeah, thank you for coming on today, Walaber. And if you maybe just wanted to give a short introduction about who you are, what you do, what you've done over the years.
Yeah, thanks for having me. My name is Tim. I go by Walaber pretty much everywhere online. As you mentioned, yeah, I'm a professional game dev, game designer, creator, whatever. Been making games for 15 plus years, something like that. Been an indie developer, full-time indie for just a few years now. Before that, I had a fairly long I've only worked at two places before that in games. I've worked at Disney for 11 years, and then I worked at Universal for two-ish. And so most of my experience was at Disney. I started in QA and was like doing testing of games and stuff like that, and then became a producer, and then became a designer, and then got to be a bit more of a design leader and stuff at Disney, working on mobile games mostly. Um, the one besides JellyCar, which I'm sure we'll talk about mostly today, but besides that, if I've worked on a game that other people have heard of, it's probably Where's My Water, which was I was the lead designer of that game, which was like a puzzle game in the early 99-cent App Store time frame, like Angry Birds Cut the Rope time frame. It was the one where you were trying to guide the water to the alligator under the sewer who wanted to take a bath. And it was a pretty popular game, so that's the one most people have heard of. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course, of course. Yeah, no, I remember seeing Where's My Water at the top of the charts just consistently for ages and ages. I don't think I ever played that one. I definitely did play some Jelly Car though as a kid. It's one of the first really popular ones for sure. So JellyCar Worlds is obviously topical because at the time of this recording it's February 2023, and I believe you released the game just this past December.
December, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yep, and that's on what, Steam, mobile app stores, Switch as well, right?
Yeah, so it's on Apple Arcade, which is the thing on Apple devices where you have like a subscription and you get access to a bunch of games. And they work on like all the devices, so you can play it on your phone or your iPad or your Apple TV or your Mac. So it's on all those platforms, but as part of Apple Arcade. And then and then there's a Windows slash Steam Deck compatible version on Steam, and yeah, it's also on Nintendo Switch.
Cool, cool. Well, as you mentioned, you've got a pretty long career. I think maybe it just makes sense to go through chronologically to some degree. What got you into game dev?
Yeah, so I mean, I was born in 1980. So I'm 42 right now. So I'm kind of like the generation who had video games from pretty young. Like I remember I got an NES, when I was like 9 years old or something like that, right? So it was kind of a big, like, video games were the new cool medium from a young age for me. Whereas like I have older brothers and sisters who never got as into games, and they're just older enough, that they had latched onto other things, more like games kind of. And I was lucky we had computers and stuff in the house relatively early compared to like my neighbors kind of thing. And my dad used computers for his work and stuff. And so I had access to computers and got interested in just what you could do with them. Initially, it was animation, like animation software. I was like really interested in that and thought, oh, maybe I could make special effects one day or something like that. And then learned a little bit of like how to program computers and stuff in high school. But it actually never occurred to me during that time that games were like a career or even an industry. And they got made, but I never thought about it. And when I thought about what I wanted to do, I knew I liked technical things, and I also liked creative things. And for me, the movies seemed like that's that's the cool combination of those things where you get to tell a story, but it's also really technical. Like, how do you get the shots? And, movies like The Matrix had come out and they had all these really interesting cinematography techniques and stuff. And so initially I went to college and studied filmmaking and thought that I was going to be a movie director or cinematographer or something like that. And it wasn't until after I graduated college and worked in for a couple of years, not in games, obviously, and then had kept making games on my own and got more into it and posting them on the internet as like freeware games, and started to get more and more interested in that and enjoyed making games more than anything else I was doing. And so then I eventually thought, it finally occurred to me that I should maybe consider trying to find a job making games. And I got really lucky in the sense that in college I had studied Japanese, and then after I graduated I lived in Japan for a little while, and so I had that skill. I could speak Japanese, and Disney, a place where I ended up working for a long time, I first got hired because they were looking for like a testing lead who was bilingual, because they had this big project they were working on with a Japanese developer, and so they wanted someone in-house to manage the testing who could translate all the bugs and like do calls with the developer and make sure that there weren't any like that the communication was good or whatever. So I kind of got in the door because I was really passionate about games and had made some, but also happened to speak Japanese, which was very timely kind of thing. And then once I was in the company, I got to go from role to role as I don't know, I guess as I was able to demonstrate inside once I was in there that maybe I'm could be a producer, or maybe I could be a designer, that kind of thing.
Wow, yeah, what a perfect set of circumstances to get your foot in the door. That's cool. So when you first started learning, I guess when you were in like middle school or high school or something, you were saying what did your resources look like for getting started and sort of just tinkering around and making stuff in your free time?
Yeah, it was books.
Yeah.
Like I think in middle school, I don't even think we had like proper internet connection, or if we did, it was just like a dial-up, like it wasn't World Wide Web yet. It was like email and like BBSs or something like that. So I remember I had a few books that I had got that were like how to teach yourself game programming, and it were like you were coding for DOS, like it was pretty. It wasn't quite as outdated as like, it was I don't know, Commodore 64 or something like that. It was like we just a little after that, so it was like DOS, but it was mostly that. And then I remember there was a amazing program that was called Click and Play, which is actually now. Have you ever heard of Multimedia Fusion? I think is what it's called now. So that company, they made one of their older versions of that was called Click and Play. And that was a Windows like 3.1 app, or maybe Windows 95. I don't remember exactly, but I had a friend in high school, and we would just like make like stupid little games, like parody games and stuff. Like I remember we were really into like Street Fighter and stuff, and so we tried to make a fighting game that we called like like Super Turbo Tournament Ultra Edition Fighting something because
That's how they named the Street Fighter games too. They just kept adding
that was
word
the idea
on top of each one. Yeah.
Yeah. And I made like little adventure games and stuff. The other thing I remember really specifically is those like little calculators that they ask you to use in like high school, where you can actually like graph things. So they have a little screen on them, those like Texas Instrument calculators. We had those for math class in high school, and you could program those in BASIC. And so I actually learned a little bit, some of my most early programming was learning how to like write little games in BASIC for my calculators, which was really fun because I could make something and then like hand it to a classmate and then see them play it, which I think got me kind of hooked on the idea that you could use a computer to just make something out of nothing, and then show it to someone. And that really stuck with me as something that I've always loved, using computers to make stuff.
Yeah, that's awesome. No, I remember like when I was in high school, like we had like modern games. I think we had like Xbox 360, PlayStation 3. It was like that generation, but people still played games on their TI-84 calculators in class and stuff. Or if like someone figured
Yeah.
out how to download a cool one off the internet,
Hmm.
like we would plug in the little like connection cable and give it to our buddies and stuff.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
remember someone made like a Elder Scrolls or like a Skyrim fan game or something, and just like some random guy on the internet and a classmate downloaded. We were all transferring. It was like the coolest thing. So I can only imagine to be the one like actually making like little games and passing it around. That must have been cool, like a cool social thing. Awesome.
Well, I mean, it was super nerdy, that's for sure, right? So, I mean, it wasn't getting me any popularity in high school, but it was still fun.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, so I guess yeah, moving up towards so when you started working at Disney, so that was so I guess you started working there before you had made JellyCar?
Yeah. Yeah. I started working at Disney in 2005. Um, and then JellyCar was 2007 is when I made it, and then the first people like it kind of came out in 2008. So I had those first few years I was in QA and stuff, and then I made JellyCar and just put it up as like a free game, which I had been doing before JellyCar. I would just make projects as a hobby and put them up on my website. As free games. So JellyCar I created with that same general idea, which is just it's a little thing I came up with. I'm gonna put it on my website and it's free. But then what happened is the App Store came around, and I was like pretty interested in that, and I was realizing that maybe I could make JellyCar work on it. I was thinking like, how would the controls work? I guess you could like touch left and right to drive and maybe tilt the device to rotate the car. That could be kind of cool. So I got excited about that, and I made a version for the App Store, and I just put it on the App Store again as a free game. In my mind, that was the same thing as putting it up on my website, and so that was sort of, it didn't have anything to do with Disney at first. It was just a free game I made, and then it did really well. Like it was a kind of, fairly popular kind of early App Store game. It wasn't right there at the beginning. It wasn't like in that first wave of games, but it was still very early, like first year of the App Store. And got like tons of downloads, and I was kind of amazed by that. And then at this point I was a designer, but I was working on a console game in Salt Lake for Disney. They owned a studio there. And but we wanted to come back to California, which is where I have mostly lived. Since I become career age, I grew up in Colorado, but mostly lived in California as an adult. And anyway, we wanted to come back to California, and so I ended up kind of like talking to the mobile team at Disney, and they were looking for new concepts. They did like an internal thing where they were like, "Hey, everyone, pitch us concepts to make new smartphone games because this big booming category, we need more, ideas for games and stuff." And so I pitched JellyCar into the company and said like, "Hey, I made this first one. It was really popular. Like, what if we just made a sequel?" And the mobile team was like, yeah." So then I didn't actually develop the second one. It was like a team inside Disney made it based on like what I thought would make sense for the second game kind of thing. And then after that, I moved over and joined the mobile team, and then started a development team, and we made JellyCar 3 as like our first project. And then the project right after that was Where's My Water?
I see. Were you at all hesitant to sort of hand off your most successful IP to Disney? Is there any sort of dilemma there?
Well, I mean, yeah. Yes, but I was already married at the time, and we just had our first kid, and my job at Disney was really good. You know what I mean? Like it was a stable job for a big company. I enjoyed working there. And so it didn't seem, at the time, it didn't seem like, oh man, I'm giving up something really valuable to the company. It kind of felt like, I mean, I made this thing and it was more popular than anything I've made before, but it was like still just a free thing I made. Like, I'd actually rather see a sequel get made. It's like a proper version of the game. And So I didn't really overthink it that much, but I was relatively conservative in general at the time. Like I thought at that point in time of just like saying, no, I made this cool thing. I'm going to go take it and go make JellyCar 2 myself, right? On my own or something like that, which in retrospect, I could have done and probably would have been a really smart decision in terms of like what that would have led to for me. But I didn't, it didn't seem like the right choice at the time. And ultimately, JellyCar in particular, like really gave me a huge opportunity to advance my career within Disney anyway. So I ended up having a much longer and more, even better job at Disney because JellyCar was like the calling card that got me to go over to mobile. And then I got to become more and more of a senior person for the time I was there. So, it's, it worked out.
Yeah, no, yeah, I'm sure that increased your value in their eyes a lot. Probably, pushing a really successful game. Were you pretty? So you didn't work on the second or the third games as a developer. You were more like overseeing as a designer, sort of.
Yeah, it was the second one. The second one was a awkward situation where I was in a different group of like portion of the company. I wasn't in the mobile group at all, and so they were making it, and I was kind of like giving input.
Gotcha.
Which of course they asked for because it was like my idea. Yeah. Right? But they didn't have to. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't like structurally I wasn't really part of the project. Like, and then the third one was like I made it. Like I joined mobile and then we started a team and we made JellyCar 3 as like our project. So that one I was officially the designer and did half the code and a bunch of the level designs and stuff on 3. So it's kind of a strange.
Nice. Well, were you happy with how the second game turned out?
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's always a weird thing to have something that you like really made. It's like, specifically you made completely, which was what the first one was. And then like hand it to someone else and then they make it, and there's like, they're not going to make the same decisions you would make, obviously. The most obvious one was I had a tough time trying to communicate with the team about the art style because JellyCar, it is intended to look like kind of a hand-drawn doodle that like not like a professional artist did, but like a average person kind of like drew a car and made a little doodle out of it, and so that's kind of the vibe of the game. It's always been kind of hand-drawn and stuff. But so that when at first the team that made JellyCar 2, they were like showing mock-ups and stuff, and it was really crayon-y, it was like really scratchy crayon. Like in my mind, the person who's drawing the JellyCar was supposed to be like, I don't know, like 14 and kind of nerdy, like, and like to draw kind of clean like lines and be like more like a nerd making like blueprints or diagrams that are sort of like kind of are careful and thoughtful, and it was not like it's a 4-year-old just scribbling a car, what I mean? And like, so at first that's kind of the direction they were taking everything. Was it looked more like this is a much more straightforward interpretation of just like a kid's doodle, and I was like trying to explain to them like, no, I don't think that's the game, and that was weird. And the biggest thing I think, if I go back and look at, is the level design is quite different. Just because I tend to make kind of more like, I don't know, sort of each level has like a little concept to it, and it's usually got a little bit of like a trick or an idea to it. It's usually about the mechanics of the game, whereas like the other team would kind of make things that were just a bit more like an aesthetic idea, like here's a level where all the pieces are letters, or something like that. And so it's like the level didn't have like oh, you used the grow in this interesting way. It was a little bit just more like, this is kind of an interesting landscape to drive around on and do a little level on, And so that wasn't the kind of level I would normally make. It's not necessarily worse. It's just that, it was definitely different. So it's always weird like that. Like, I know you were talking about, potentially letting someone like work on RetroMMO or sort of do something with it. And you'll probably have a similar feeling, when you see the way they handle it or work with it, like it's cool, but it's also weird,
Yeah, I was actually making that same comparison in my mind a little bit. I mean, that's kind of what has influenced me to take the path that I have, because I mean, the situation that I'm in is because of a non-compete. I'm not able to work on my MMO for the next year, And what would probably make the most sense from the business perspective and making the most amount of players happy would be to just pass off the game to my friend and let him run it himself entirely for a year. But I am instead electing to just let him make a private server with a copy of the code because I'm so overprotective of my sort of vision. Even though I think he's super talented, my friend Frulu, like I obviously think very highly of his ability to do justice. But I just know that if I had someone else touching RetroMMO for a year and I'm not allowed to do anything with it in any official capacity, like I'd lose my mind. I don't think I would maybe act that way about every single game I ever publish. RetroMMO is a bit unique for me because it's kind of like my really big passion project and like what I really think will probably be the largest thing I work on over the most amount of time. But yeah, it's tough. So I guess so when you worked on right, you said for JellyCar 3 you did a good amount of the programming and level design stuff, and you said for Where's My Water you were mainly in just like a design sort of role?
No, that was a very hands-on thing too. Like I've always been kind of a designer programmer hybrid person. Like my job at Disney was always officially designer in some way. Designer or like lead designer or like design like director or whatever. Like it was always design technically, but whenever I worked on a project I would always do implementation as well, just because I like it, and I really enjoy it, and I like the combination of those two things. But yeah, so on Where's My Water, for example, I was the lead designer, so I was kind of in charge of the direction of the game, but it was a super collaborative game. So there was essentially like 8 of us that worked on the game, and we all kind of did a little bit of everything on it. But so I ended up doing a lot of code on the game, but we also had like a lead engineer who did some of the more like serious coding on the game, and then Chad, who is the person I work with at Toyful Games. We made Very Very Valet, which was a game we released somewhat recently. The two of us made that game, and he was on Where's My Water as well, and he was like a designer programmer hybrid as well. So I've always liked that combination, and anytime I have an opportunity to put a team together or something, I always try and find designer programmer hybrids because they have such a, you can just make so much, you can make stuff faster that looks like it was made with more people, that has a more cohesive vision, much easier if you have hybrid people like that. Because if you have to, someone articulates the design and then they hand it to the engineer, and then the engineer codes it, and then they come up with the 10 like edge cases that no one thought about, and then they have to go back to the designer and like stop what they're doing and be like, hey, what do we do about these edge cases or whatever, and then everyone has to talk about it and think about it and then somehow write it down, and then the coder has to go implement it. Like things just get lost in the translation there, even if everyone's actually really talented and smart, and not to mention you might have team dynamics that could be great or not so great, right? Yeah. So when you have like a hybrid person, what they can understand the design more fundamentally, and so when they're coding it, if they come across those edge cases, they'll just like make mostly the right decision and just do it right then. They don't have to stop and ask a bunch of people and stuff, and so everything kind of goes faster and stays a little more cohesive. So that's kind of how it was on all those mobile games, really, was that we had sort of people who would traditionally have more than one, or they did tasks that would traditionally be more than one role at like a big studio.
That's cool. I mean, especially for you, that's sort of what you were doing before you started working in game dev professionally at all, just making a bunch of these solo prototypes that you were just tossing out for free anyway, doing all the pieces yourself. I mean, during those times, even like before you started at Disney and you were just posting games on your website, were you doing much collaboration with friends and stuff like that? Or for the most part, were you just going at it all yourself?
No, they were mostly solo. Actually, I don't know why. I don't know if it's just because I didn't like have friends who were also interested around, or if I'm just a bit more naturally inclined to make stuff on my own or something. But
it sounds like you like to.
Yeah, I think it might just be that I like it. I really like all the aspects involved, in making a game. Like I like coming up with ideas. I like, thinking about design and difficulty and challenges for players and all that kind of stuff. But I really like coding and solving the technical challenge of trying to actually make the games as well. I like the tech art a lot. Like I really like, figuring out how to achieve the visuals and effects and feedback and things. And, I'm not the best just like straight up artist, so it's like if I want to make a solo game, you almost guarantee it's not going to have like a realistic human in it because like that's not going to happen. You know what I mean? Unless the design means I can get away with just sort of like using you know, like a pre-made thing or something. But so I've never really been like a proper artist, but it's kind of everything else about game dev I really enjoy doing and learning, and I'd rather learn all of it a little bit, and kind of move around to different tasks than to sort of focus on just one bit of it.
Gotcha. Cool. Well, are there? I think you said 15 years you spent at Disney. Were there any other really standout projects, or just like standout moments that, I guess, sort of had an influence on you, aside from the JellyCar games? Where's My Water?
Yeah, I mean, like games that I feel like I had a big impact on. Those are the big ones for sure. After Where's My Water, there was a bunch of sequels and stuff to Where's My Water, which most of which I think were pretty cool. We made some fun ones. We made a Phineas and Ferb version called Where's My Perry that was pretty cool. There was a Mickey Mouse themed one called Where's My Mickey. There was actually a version for a Chinese cartoon character, so it was called Where's My XYY, which is like Xi Yang Yang, which is like a famous kind of cartoon character in China. There was like a spin-off version of that and stuff. Those are all pretty interesting, but not as noteworthy as the original game for sure. And then after that, mobile really very quickly moved in a direction of free to play. And so for me, the time frame after Where's My Water, really until I leave Disney, is like a conflicted time where I had a leadership role and I was fulfilling because I was, like helping people with their careers and, had some kind of ability to influence what games we made or how we made them. But at the same time, it wasn't as fun because the games were kind of burdened with the transition to free-to-play design and kind of how to make those games and even what kind of games you should even make if they're going to be free-to-play. And, the two games that I had made before that were successful were not free-to-play style games at all, right? Like JellyCar is not a free-to-play.
Yeah, we're talking like
idea.
Microtransactions, that type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha.
Yeah, like everything switched to the game needs to be free, and then you got to sell stuff inside the game. And the the whole team, but myself included, really struggled with that because the culture kind of changed a little bit, and it was necessary because if your game is free and you're selling stuff inside the game, then what you needed to realize, and I was slow to realize this, is that your game is now a store and you have to run it like a store. You know what I mean? Whereas before, your game was a product and you would try and make a good product and then put it in a store like the App Store or whatever. And you had to think about, of course, like, will people want my product in the App Store? Will they buy it or not or whatever, of course. But there was a little bit of a different mindset, whereas now is like your game is a store and you need to think about, like, we have all these people coming in for free. How do we like entice them with things to buy? And how do we like, do the kinds of things that you notice stores do where they're like, oh, we have a little card that you can get and it gives you a discount. But, it's like, well, why does the card give you a discount? It's like, oh, because the card lets us like keep track of your purchases. And with that information, we can understand better, like how often you come to the store and like what kind of things you buy. And then we can like do a better job of getting you to buy stuff. So it's, like those types of things needed to be in the game, and that meant that the people involved in deciding how the game worked wasn't just, game design people with a little bit of input from marketing. It was like now there were people whose job was to talk about the store part of the game. And they had a big say, of course, in what should we work on now or what should we change about our game in order to make it successful. And so it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it certainly was a big change, and I definitely struggled with it. And and ultimately just kind of felt like that it was a bit frustrating to kind of have to constantly worry about all those aspects. The simplest simplification of it all is that, like, in order for a free to play game to work, now this is different, I think, from like an MMO or something. I don't have that type of experience where there's a big social component to the game, but I think there's probably some similarities. But in mobile, like free to play, at the time I was working on it, basically, your game would be free, so a lot of people would play it, and then maybe 1% of those players would ever pay any money ever in the game, and then of that 1%, another, like a smaller, like maybe 10% or less, would actually pay a really disproportionate amount. And if you didn't have the math like that, like you had to have those people that could pay, or that could find it worth spending a lot of money in the game, $20, $50, $100, $1,000, right, in this single game, to make up for all the people that were playing it for free, And so it's super weird to figure out, how do you make a game where it's interesting and engaging for the 99% of people that come in and play for free, but has something in it that's worthwhile enough for people to have kind of an unlimited potential to spend inside the game. And it takes a real certain kind of game to even for that to add up at all, And if you have a finite game with an ending, like, that doesn't work. How does the person spend $1,000 if the game ends? You know what I mean? So the game can't end. So you have to come up with concepts that are never ending, which is why things like, match 3 style games, which are a little more endlessly repeatable and have a lot more randomization in them and stuff, worked on the casual side. And on the more kind of like, gamery side, it was like character collection RPG battle games, where you could kind of keep collecting characters and upgrading them and have different events that constricted what characters you could bring in, and then you could add new characters over time, and you had a convoluted system to level them up, and you could kind of turn that into a really, 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 really long lasting, thing. Anyway, so that characterizes my last bit at Disney, which was sort of cool career stuff, but I don't remember the games as fondly for those reasons.
Yeah, I think even non-game devs can probably see how that shift towards free-to-play is, severely limits the creativity in a lot of ways. And it makes sense, because a business needs to make money, so of course Disney is going to want to make what's profitable. But it's unfortunate, and I think people generally speak very lowly of the fact that games have kind of free-to-play games have kind of gone that way. And you mentioned, there definitely is some of that in MMOs as well. I
imagine the sort of endless promise is sort of kind of important, right? Like, or at least like, I feel like some of them have like some kind of, well, it's not usually like story really so much as like level caps and things, right? Where it's sort of like, we've created enough of like a system where you can reach a certain level, and then like there's not much for you to do once you reach that level, so that's where we're going to cap it for now until we like add another layer to the game or something, right? At least that's from the outside. That seemed like a parallel to me.
MMOs are definitely able to get around having a lot of microtransactions as well, if they rely more heavily on monthly subscriptions, which is like the payment model that I have for my game. But like realistically, if I'm trying to make the most money, I'm probably doing both. Probably having some sort of paid subscription option, and also selling some sort of microtransaction sort of thing on the side.
Or
me personally,
packs or something.
I would want to be more ethical about it. So like my plans are only just selling like cosmetic stuff in that sort of form. But that's definitely the route that things have gone. So is that ultimately what influenced your decision to end up leaving Disney and go full-time indie, or did you have other jobs in between before you went full-time indie, or what did that look like?
I had a so essentially, so basically, it was going more and more free to play. Also, in general, Disney was starting to become a little more conservative on games, and so like it was looking like it was less likely that they were going to keep having internal studios making games inside of Disney, and they were probably going to shrink down a little bit and focus more on licensing, which is something they had done in the past. They had focused on licensing, and then they had decided, no, we're going to make the games ourselves, and had a big organization around that. And then it looked like that was, kind of going back, and that turned out to be true. So I was kind of lucky in the sense that I moved over to Universal right before they like decided, yep, we're closing up all the internal development, which I would have been caught up in that then had I stayed. But so I went to Universal, which was frankly was a very similar role to my role at Disney, but since I was going over there and I had a little bit of like opportunity to negotiate, I was able to negotiate you were talking about a non-compete earlier. I was able to negotiate a little thing in my contract that said within these certain bounds I can make some projects on my own on the side. And I was very nice, and we like worked out exactly how what I was going to make clearly wasn't going to compete with the kind of projects that we're making at Universal, but that was a big appeal for me because I was like, yeah, I can finally maybe make some small stuff on the side and actually put it out there. And honestly, that would give me a sense then of kind of like maybe I could just do that, but I was a little scared to just do that, when I left Disney. So I did that, and I was working on one game along while I was at Universal. And then actually Universal just didn't turn out to last very long. They decided to close down the group, and so I was laid off. And I got laid off when I had a game almost done. But it wasn't a game I thought, if I had been trying to make a living as an indie game dev, it probably wouldn't be the game I would choose to make because it was kind of not the most marketable idea, right? But it was a fun side project. But it was almost done. And I was like, okay, well, I guess this is the like sign I needed that I'm going to try and put this game out, and then I'm going to work out how I'm going to try and make, indie happen. And so that game was called Pro Gymnast Simulator, which is it's like a weird physics-based co-op. It's co-op gymnastics, basically, if that makes sense. And so that came out, and then, like I was mentioning before, my friend Chad and I formed a little tiny company, and we made a game together called Very Very Valet. And then basically after that, the next thing I made was the new JellyCar game, which catches us up.
Cool, very cool. We should go in depth a bit with some of the JellyCar World stuff. One sort of random offhand thing about the original JellyCar. I noticed on maybe it was on your website or maybe it was Wikipedia or something. Did you actually post the game on the Xbox 360 Indie Games platform? Was the first release? Is that so?
Yeah. The very first version was made with XNA, which was like that Microsoft thing where you could, in theory, make something and it would run on PC and it would run on Xbox. And so I thought that was so cool. I was like, well,
framework, right?
Yeah. It was C#. Yep. And that was my first time using C#. Until before that, I'd been using C++ with like not really a full game engine, but this thing called Ogre, which was like a rendering system to make like my PC games that I'd been making up until that point. Anyway, and the idea of having my game that I could put it on a console was like, oh, that's so cool. So I wanted to try XNA out, and JellyCar ended up being the first project I made with XNA. But between me making JellyCar and then Microsoft finally revealing how you could like release an XNA game on the Xbox, it became like they didn't allow free games. I kind of assumed that there'd be some option where you could put a game up for free, but they didn't allow it. Like you had to make your game paid. And so I was like, oh man, like I can't release it then. So it actually never really came out on Xbox, although there was a demo for GDC because like Microsoft wanted to show off like XNA, and they picked a few games from the community, and one of which was JellyCar. And so there was like a little booth at GDC, and apparently JellyCar, you could play it there. But then it never really came out like as a proper game on Xbox because of that problem. Because I was still thinking, oh, this has to be a freeware game, otherwise I'll probably get in trouble, at my day job.
Oh, I see. Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, now that we're caught up to modern times, what made you start thinking about making a new JellyCar game?
Yeah, I mean, basically, I was like, oh my god, I'm going indie, and I made Pro Gymnast Simulator. And I'm happy with the game, but it didn't sell very well. And then my friend Chad and I made Very Very Valet, and we were really happy with the game, but it didn't sell very well. So one element of it was I was like, wow, what can I do? And then I was thinking like, man, if I could make a JellyCar game, that might be a bit more of a head start, right? Because it's something people know and they've heard of it, and a bunch of people liked it back in the day. Maybe those people are still around. Maybe they'd like to play a new one. That would give me, a leg up in terms of just getting any kind of audience at all to show up for the game in the first place. But I was like, there's no way I'm going to be able to make one because like Disney owns the IP, and like it can't be a priority for them, like I don't even know how I would go about getting that, So, but eventually I was like, well, I got to at least try. So I reached out to Disney, and luckily that there were some people there that I still knew from when I worked there. So at least they would like, answer my emails kind of thing. And I kind of just lucked out that the business development people at Disney at the time who were new were super cool, and they were just like, yeah, this is something that should happen. Like, it's your game, you came up with it, you have a concept and you want to make a new one, like let's figure out a way to make it happen. So I was so excited about that. And then like that got me even more excited just in general, because I started thinking about, yeah, how long has it been, since there was a JellyCar game, like, and I've learned so much now as a dev, like, I feel like I can make a really good one this time. And I kind of look back on the old ones, and I look back on them fondly, but if you go back and play them, they're a little rough around the edges. And so I was excited then to try to sort of, yeah, I don't know, like try to pay off my skills I've learned, and make the best one, and also get it on a bunch of platforms, which would be really cool, and something I didn't really had a chance to do before. So that was kind of the impetus of it. And then the project just became, oh, I didn't really think about this that hard, but now I'm making a sequel, and sequels are kind of weird to make, like, because you have to constantly go like, well, like, what should I change about the old game and what should I keep the same? And that's kind of different thought process than just making something new, like you don't have that dynamic when you're making something brand new or original. When you're making something that's a sequel, you constantly have this kind of thing where you're wondering, is this change I'm considering gonna make it better, or will people feel like I've changed it too much or I haven't changed it enough, or like all those kinds of things. This is an interesting aspect that I haven't really grappled with all that much, at least not on like my personal games,
Gotcha. Yeah, that blows my mind that a company like Disney was willing to part with one of their IPs. Did they just give it to you for free, or are you allowed to say what?
No. It's like it's a license. So basically, like, we have an agreement, like it's a simple agreement compared to if I was trying to like make a a Star Wars game or something and get that license, right? But fundamentally it's similar thing. So there's like copyright Disney on the game, and they still own the IP, but I have a license to make the game. So yeah, worked out.
That's great. Well, when it comes to developing the game, I know I've personally watched you do a lot of the work on the game, since you do stream on your Twitch page, the Walaber Twitch page. What sort of got you into the Twitch streaming aspect of it, and how early into the development did you start streaming it as well?
So the streaming thing really kind of came by accident, or it wasn't something I was like, oh, I should do that. I didn't even know people streamed game dev. And I had always thought that Twitch, I always had this weird, maybe I'm too old to understand it kind of feeling towards Twitch, where I was like, I don't get it. Like, I don't really get why people want to go hang out and like watch other people play video games. And the few times I had ever just like, this is a while back, way long before I started streaming, like back when I was at Disney and stuff, because people would talk about Twitch and, oh, streaming is like, so this vibrant thing that's happening in the, or whatever, like we should learn about it or whatever. And like the few times I had dropped by, I think I had just come across streamers who were, it felt a little weird to me because they were like constantly, kind of, I don't know, dancing around the interaction with their chat of trying to get them to sub and stuff. And so the whole thing felt kind of a little weird to me. So I was kind of turned off way back in the day. But anyway, so cut to I'm going indie and I'm working on my gymnastics game, and what was it? I think it was like there was a Steam Next Fest or whatever, or like one of the Steam events, and they had a thing where they're like, "Hey, you can stream, you can and should stream during the event uh into Steam." And I was like, "Well, I'm trying to do everything I can with this game. I guess I'll try this. Like, I don't really know how this works. I guess I got to learn how this works." And so I like created a Twitch account and started streaming, working on Pro Gymnast, mostly so I could figure it out, so I could do the Steam thing. And then the Steam thing kind of came and went, and it didn't, whatever. Like, it wasn't a big, memorable thing. But I, along the way, like, started really enjoying streaming, working on the game, and was like, this is really fun. Like, I kind of like to talk things out, and as I work on them anyway, so I didn't find it too disruptive or like, difficult to do. Like, I kind of just talk to myself anyway, and even if I'm not saying it out loud, I have like an internal monologue that's essentially just me kind of like having a conversation with myself anyway about what I'm doing or how I'm going to solve a problem or what I'm thinking about or whatever. And so I was just like, oh, well, when I stream, I just say all that stuff out loud, and it's not any different really than if I'm working, except that then sometimes people come by and like chat, which is like really fun. So then I started finding all the other dev streamers on Twitch and was like, this is amazing. Like, there's so many cool people, and they're all just like really friendly and like inviting, and they're all just sharing what they're working on, and kind of everyone's just hanging out and enjoying this thing that I like enjoying too. And I maybe kind of realized I didn't have a lot of like community around me, for making games. I didn't have like buddies that get together and hang out and like do game dev together. But when I go on Twitch, it's kind of like that, whether I'm streaming or watching someone else's stream. So I just got super into it. So basically, almost all of JellyCar Worlds development, I streamed the whole time. I didn't reveal I was working on it until I knew I was going to actually have the license, and then because there was a license involved, I was a little scared to talk about it early until I like made sure like Disney wasn't going to freak out that I was going to stream like working on the game and stuff like that. So there was a period where I was working on it off stream, and then maybe like, I don't know, like 4 or 5 months in or something, I finally like got the okay and everything, and so then I just kind of converted over my stream to just being working on JellyCar for like a year basically. So a lot of it was made live.
Nice, nice. Yeah, I can definitely speak to those. Yeah, the same sort of sentiments. It's very friendly, sharing, close knit community we have here. There's definitely like an overlap, between the skills that like a good programmer should have, is communication wise, with a good streamer communication wise. Like when you think about when you have like a job interview, doing like a programming problem. What they're judging is your ability to talk through it, and then what's also valued as far as implementing a feature is probably the ability to talk through it properly. So it's kind of funny that there's like a lot of game dev / programming streamers that have maybe not watched a lot of Twitch themselves, and like you maybe didn't even really get it, but already have a little bit of an ability to sort of do it right, just from saying, just throwing the thoughts out loud.
Right.
So
yeah, I mean, I've totally converted now. Like I like Twitch a lot. Like, I've spent I always have a Twitch window open basically all the time now, whenever I'm doing work or whatever, and I'm always lurking in something, whether it's a game dev stream or like a speed run, stream, or like whatever. Like I'm like super into it now. And I've had a fun time meeting different people through Twitch, which has been really cool. Like we were talking about Sympathy earlier, someone I never would have come across or met otherwise, and Sympathy is such a cool creator who has a different, story of how she got into making games, but is also just a super fun to watch, and her community is all really nice and cool. And Vimlark is another one of those where it's always fun to go hang out in their stream, and Vimlark, by the way, is just doing the whole world a service with his thing where he plays community games every week.
Oh yeah, he's been doing that consistently for so long too.
Yeah, it's so great. I would love to do something like that too, although I don't really have like I think the people that hang out in my streams it's not like there's something different about it. Like Vimlark, well, A, has a lot more people, but B, has a lot of people who are actively making stuff, I think, and it kind of became a thing for him. But it'd be cool if there were more places that were doing that, because it's so valuable to whether you're like a beginner or someone who's made lots of games, like watching someone play your game is like one of the most valuable things you can do, to see what it's really like to play your game and then improve it. Yeah, so that's an amazing thing.
Yeah, when it comes to someone like Vimlark, I mean, he sort of bases his content around game jams a lot of the time, so it's
Yeah, that's
natural for a
probably,
lot of the people to surround to be
yeah,
those
makes sense.
the types of people to want to throw out prototypes. I saw on your website that you've done some game jams here and there. I think you listed some Ludum Dares that you've participated
Mm-hmm.
in, which is not surprising considering that the thing that you got started on was prototype one man games.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Yeah,
you still do anything like that, or I don't know, how's the game jam work that you've done influenced you?
I love doing game jams, but and I wish I could do them more. Um, but it just comes in waves of like I had more time weirdly to do game jams when I worked like a full time job because I didn't have like personal projects that I was trying to do as a do as my career, and so like it was fun to just like spend a weekend and make a game jam thing or something. Since I've been working on like JellyCar, if I have time on the weekend, I just feel like I gotta be working on JellyCar. You know what I mean? Like so
Yeah.
it's very hard to like to to give myself the luxury of doing a game jam or something like that, even though they're super fun. And I think probably one of the best ways for smaller teams to land on concepts. Because I mean, it's a great way to get a prompt that's external, so that you have something to grapple with, which kind of, fuels your creativity. And then you make something really quick. You don't worry about too much because you have a strong deadline. And then you put it out there. And if you get a really good response from it, like that can be a great starting point then, right? Because then you'll be confident. You have an idea that people are reacting to, and you could feel more comfortable about like spending a bunch of time and effort on it, And I mean, certainly there's famous cases of game jam games that turned into like successful commercial products and stuff. Um, but that like even that aside, of course, game jams are just awesome because they're such a like I like to call it it's a full lap. Like when you're making a game and it's a kind of a long project, there's a lot of phases to it. It's like, oh, figuring out what you're going to make in the first place, and then making all the big important decisions early on that like frame the thing and decide the scope or whatever. And then you have that long period where you're just like actually making all the junk, right? And then you have a kind of frantic, exciting period at the end where you have to like actually finish the thing and see how hard it is to actually finish that task list, and then put it out there and finally get a response and then repeat, right? But that can be spread out over a year or a long time. And the cool thing about a game jam is you get to do a little mini version of all of it. Let's do the ideation, let's figure it out, let's choose the scope, let's do the hard part of making the stuff, let's like freak out and try and finish it, and then put it out and get a response from people. And so I think I think a lot of people get bogged down and don't make games because they take so long and it's so hard to finish stuff, and you just get bogged down and you just stop. And so game jams are a nice way to force yourself to make something small, because if you make something small and you go through the whole loop, I feel like you get the positive feedback loop, which you can't have until you put something out and then see people play it, and then that makes you more motivated to like either revise the thing you just made or make something else. And like if you never get that full loop, then it's not a feedback loop. It's just an uphill climb that never ends, And so game jams and small projects, I think, are a really, really great way to kind of get over the hump of actually making stuff if you're passionate about it and you want to do it.
Yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I mean, it's one of the best. I guess it's as far as the amount of engagement and the amount of feedback that you'll get for the amount of work that you put in, and then on top of that, enforcing that you don't spend more than a certain amount of time on it. There's a reason that
Yeah.
they're as popular as they are and growing within
Mm-hmm.
within the game dev community. Are there any of the game jam games that you've worked on that you are hoping to revisit at some point?
Let's see. Kind of, yes. Actually, there's two. Yeah. So there's one that's kind of obvious, which is actually when I was starting the JellyCar project, I had to recreate or sort of like rewrite or port or whatever my physics code from the old JellyCar games to Unity. And so before I started working on JellyCar, but I had the physics mostly working in Unity. I purposefully did a couple game jams where I gave myself the rule, like, I'm going to use my physics system in this game jam game so I can like actually see if it's ready. Like, is it all working? Can I like make a little game out of it? Or am I going to notice stuff, like, oh, I haven't thought about, I don't know, how to get collision events properly or like, or whatever, and so I made two little games that were like soft body physics game jam games. And one of them wasn't very good, but one of them was called Balloon Out. And it was just you're flying a little balloon around, and the balloon's like a soft body. It makes sense. Balloons are squishy. And you're like in this arcade game, but everything's squishy, and you like push yourself up against the walls and like pop the walls, and eventually you like break out of the arcade game and you go back into the like circuit board and like I just think that one turned out really cool. It's like a simple concept, but it just was really satisfying to play, and it had just enough of a narrative idea, that was like a little bit more than just the mechanics. And so I really like that one. I want to do something with it. I don't know what to do with it because I don't think it's a big game idea. Well, and for me, a big game idea is still a small idea, but it's not. I don't know if it's like a commercial product, put it out on Steam kind of thing, but I do like that one. I'd like to do something with it. And then this other one I made, I absolutely will turn into a game at some point, even though I think only 10 people will ever buy it. But it's like a game that I just love so much and wish existed in the world that it's like I have to make it. And that one was this one. It's called Basic Replicator is what I called it. Basic as in the programming language BASIC. And it's like a coding game. And like the idea of it is you write a tiny little basic program that will produce a 3D object, like a voxel object. And so what you do is you write a little piece of code that actually gets executed for every single voxel in the thing. So like let's say it's like a 10 by 10 by 10 space. Then you write this one function in BASIC, and it's going to call that function for all whatever 1,000 cubes. And the job of your function is to just return a number that says, is this empty or is it what color is it? So like a 1 would be black, and a 2 would be green, and 3 would be yellow, or something like that. And so it's kind of like writing a shader where you're like,
I was about to say,
like, yeah,
like
it's almost
secretly
like
training people to learn shader code. Wow.
Yeah, which the truth is, I actually just really love shaders. And so it's kind of like that where you're writing the inner loop. So you have to do stuff like, the only input you get is the X, Y, and Z position. Like it's like, oh, we're currently deciding, is the space filled in for the voxel at 003 or whatever. And so you have to use that information to like write some logic that will produce a shape or something. And so the game just gives you like goal objects that are complete, and then you have to derive the code necessary to like produce that object kind of thing. And I just like it's like a total coding game. Like I don't know if you've played any of the like Zachtronics games, like Space Cam or like TIS-80, or do you know any of those games?
I haven't. No.
So Zachtronics is like this kind of semi-well-known indie thing where they make like engineering themed games. Like the most famous early one they made was called Space Cam, which was like one of those like factory style games where you're designing a factory, and the factory is like combining atoms or elements together to make like molecules or whatever. But it's like a factory layout game where it's like, you need to make this weird molecule. How do you like construct a thing that will like grab this and then turn it and then hand it to this thing? And like, but the cool thing about it is that there's no right or wrong answer. If your factory creates the molecule, you pass, right? But then at the end, what it does is it simulates your factory, and then it gives you metrics. It's like, oh, well, in order to make 50 of these molecules, your factory cost this much because you used this many pieces or whatever, and it took this much energy or these many cycles to do it. So was your factory efficient or not? And then it shows you like a leaderboard for both those metrics. So you can see like, oh, other people made a more efficient factory than me, or other people made a cheaper factory than me. Like they pulled it off with less pieces or whatever. And then, you can get all nerdy about trying to like optimize it. And they have like that same formula for lots of different games, including coding based ones, where it's more like how many instructions or cycles did your code take to do whatever the task was. or how much code did you use, like how many, how much memory did it take, which is be the equivalent of like the cost of the factory or whatever. So anyway, I've always really liked those games. They're super nerdy, and they have this cool open-ended structure where if your solution works, it works. There's no like pre-planned, oh, you had to make it exactly the way the designer intended, but it has this crazy element to it where you can get really nerdy and like optimize for different things and stuff. And anyway, this game like fits that mold where it works the same way, where it's like, I just tell you, you need to make a chair. Here's the shape. And as long as your code produces a chair, even if it's like a bunch of if statements, like 1,000 if statements, like if x equals 0 and y equals 1 and z equals 3, output, the wood color or whatever, or you write like a formula that's really smart, it doesn't matter. Like, so anyway, that's a long-winded way of saying I'm excited about that idea, but it's probably not a lot of overlap with JellyCar fans. So even if like I put it out there, I don't think like people who are like, oh cool, what did Walaber make next? They'll probably be like, what the heck is this? But someday I have to make that game because I like it too much.
Well, yeah, that's a beautiful concept. The idea of I know that I don't have a great like marketing pitch for a large audience for this right off the bat, but I just love the concept so much I got to put it out. That's the mark of passion, right there.
Yeah,
and then your other concepts, sort of like to the contrary, like the balloon with the similar physics to what you were doing with JellyCar, probably would be, I guess, more marketable to your audience to some degree,
right.
Especially if the art style was relatively similar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that is an interesting thing to think about. Like what to make next, and what would be smart versus what would be fun, and what's the right balance between those things, and like all that stuff. I still feel like there's just so much to learn. Like, I feel relatively confident about making games, but I'm still not super confident about choosing the right game to make a living. Like, oof,
Yeah,
that's super hard. That's a whole extra skill that I haven't had as much experience with, for sure.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm sure that you must feel a good deal of pressure to focus on what's more likely to be profitable, since you are doing the full-time indie thing, right? I mean, is that the case, or?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm I've got 3 games that have come out, since trying the full-time indie thing, and 2 of them were not successful enough that it's like, cool, we could just keep doing that. Like the future games will need to do a little better, or otherwise I'm gonna have to, maybe find a long-term solution. And JellyCar is sort of done much better. So it's a little bit closer to like, if I could just keep making that level of game, probably could keep doing it. But even that's still not like a guaranteed, thing. So it is scary for sure, and it's just, I've just been kind of realizing more and more that, yeah, the marketing side is hard and is a very important skill, and, you can't overlook it. And, when you work at like a big company or whatever, it's easy to kind of just be like, oh, I'm just a designer, and this marketing people are so annoying, or like there's these aspects of how these products get made and decided that you like could at a distance complain about. But then it's like, well, actually those people were, like they weren't an annoyance, they were an important part. Like,
Yeah.
how you actually make creative stuff as a business, which is super hard. I guess that's kind of the common thing, like that you see, I think, with lots of full-time indies, is that it becomes a bigger part of what they're talking about, or what they're learning, or what they're trying to figure out, is the sustainability part of it, without just hoping that one day you'll have some kind of massive hit, right? Of course that would just change everything, but you can't really, that can't be the plan.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. No, it's tough. I think it's a very small fraction of the people that are doing full-time indie end up making it work in the long term, as far as breaking even sort of thing. It's really tough. I had your Steam page open for JellyCar Worlds earlier today, and I was impressed. You have 237 Steam reviews so far, 98% of which are positive, which is a great ratio there. Did you have any sort of expectations ahead of time for what, as like, how many sales you were trying to get versus how it's turned out? Or? What are your
I
thoughts on
mean,
that?
I, JellyCar in particular, like, I mean, I have like Pro Gymnast, right, which I released, so I have a baseline of like, okay, I know, like, I put out a game and it sold this much, right, and that was, I mean, I guess before that game came out, I didn't know what to expect, but knowing how many copies I sold of the game and the price of the game and what that means for income for me, I was like, okay, well, that's not success. That's not. I can't just, you know, uh, if it comes out and it does Pro Gymnast level again, then I'm gonna start to freak out, you know. But I didn't. So I knew I needed to be bigger than that, but I didn't. I didn't really have any idea like what the range could be, you know, because it's especially because it's JellyCar and theoretically there's a bunch of people out there that have heard of it that I think would be excited that like now that they're older, there's a new game out from that they remember from they were younger kind of thing. But it's like I don't know what to make of that. You know, like is that actually a lot of people or not? And even if it is a lot of people, will any of them even know the game's out? Like, how do I let them know that the game is out? You know, so it felt like there was this huge possible range of outcomes, and I just had no idea where I would land. And so, you know, if I'm comparing JellyCard to Pro Gymnast, it's way better, right? Certainly on a better track than that. But if I compare it to like, I don't know, like if I try to like do some theory about like how many JellyCar fans must be out there and how many of them I reached, it's like, oh, I haven't reached any of them, you know, like almost none. So it's super weird. I have no idea how to judge it. So I mean, I'm happy. The game seems to be doing pretty well. I get to work on it more, and I'm going to do a bunch of updates, and I'm enjoying that. And so I don't know, fine, you know, it's going to be great. I don't really know how to gauge.
Yeah,
So,
it's. I mean, yeah,
you
it
know,
sounds like reasonably so. You probably didn't so much know what to expect, given that it's a sequel to a really old franchise, and your target audience is people that sort of grew up with it, rather than a sequel to a game that was just recently came out. It's tough. It's a unique situation for
yeah.
sure. I mean, what was your marketing strategy for reaching these people? Did you do any sort of advertising, or I guess like social media strategy? Or I guess how did you go about reaching your people?
Yeah, I mean, the ones that I have reached, I do think that it was kind of you to mention that the reviews are positive so far. I do personally think that means the game is still in a little bit of a bubble of the people who heard about it while I was working on it and then all bought it, and those people are kind of like gonna be the most, positive people, right? Like the
Yeah,
game they were excited about came
for
out, so
sure.
like they like it, you know what I mean? And actually, I wouldn't mind to see. This is a weird thing to say, but like I personally wouldn't mind to see the review count go up and the ratio of positive reviews go down, because that would mean that I'm starting to reach people who are just more casually interested in the game or like heard about it and then decided to buy it. And some of those people won't love it, right? Like just the math says that will be the case. Like
For sure,
if
for
the game
sure.
was reaching people who are just kind of like, oh, what's this? I heard about it or whatever. Maybe I'll try it. You know, some of those people will just be like, not for me. You know,
Yeah.
and I don't think those people exist yet. And so that means I haven't, been able to kind of, I don't know, break out of sort of a little bubble. But the bubble is big enough to have several hundred people leave reviews, right? So obviously I can't complain about that. And that group of people I think is mostly from Twitch streaming, and then a little bit of posting constantly on Twitter. Although Twitter's been kind of, I don't know, very on and off for me. I don't really feel like I've gotten a lot of traction from Twitter overall. I've had a few posts here and there that have done okay, but it hasn't been like something I would say, oh man, yeah, I really had a smart strategy for Twitter. The surprise for me was TikTok. And I think it's because of it specifically that I'm working on JellyCar. Because I started like kind of on a whim, was like, well, I guess I'm gonna try this TikTok thing. It's kind of like Twitch, where I'm like, I don't really get it, I don't really understand TikTok, but I guess I should try it. And then I posted some stuff and had a like surprising response. Like lots of people would comment and see it, and I started getting followers and stuff. And I think it's because like the TikTok audience is in the exact age range where they like saw JellyCar when they were like young,
Yeah,
like
that's definitely a
and
part of
so
it. I mean, it's my
So
age range, really, is the is probably those people.
yeah, like I think it's, somewhere between like 18 and 25 or something, like, or somewhere around there
Yeah.
is like, because if you subtract 15 from that, you get like, I guess 18, they would have been really young when JellyCar came out. But anyway, this sort of like, oh, iPod Touch, I played it, remember it kind of thing,
Yeah.
or they're a little bit even younger than that, and they played the like knockoffs that were on Cool Math Games and other websites. And so then they think I'm copying this game that they liked from the web, which is
hilarious.
always fun for me to try and like, they're like, oh, Jelly Truck ripoff or whatever, and then I like write in the chat like, actually it's the other way around, but whatever, thanks for chatting. But I was really surprised about TikTok, and I do think a fair amount of the limited like success I've had for getting the word out about the game, a lot of it actually has been TikTok, and I've been I post a lot on there now, and so I'm getting a little better at it, but it's still it's weird. Like the range of outcomes on TikTok is very strange. Like you'll post something and you'll get like no one seat watches it, or it gets like no views, and you post something and it gets tons, and it's like I don't understand what the difference was. I still don't get why some things do well and other things don't, but some things do from time to time. So that's been probably one of the bigger, one of the few things I feel like I've kind of done okay-ish. But I haven't really done any paid marketing, or I didn't do any really big campaigns or anything like that. I mean, I made trailers and posted them on my channel and stuff, but it's not a big channel, so it's not like they get a ton of views or anything. And then the other thing I've benefited from a little bit is people streaming and making YouTube content from the game.
Yeah.
Because it seems like people have kind of, it's not like tons of people are making content on it, but there's been, an amount of people that have been playing the game and making YouTube videos or streaming it on Twitch. And the game seems to do pretty well in that format. I think mostly because you can record your own sound effects and make the game really silly. And so then the streamer or the YouTuber like kind of is more, like their personality becomes more part of them playing the game.
Yeah, for sure.
And so I'm really happy that I have that feature in the game, because I think it really helps from that point of view. There's probably a lot more opportunity there if I could do a better job of getting the game to be noticed by larger people with larger audiences. But that's about it though. I don't really know what I'm doing marketing.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're definitely listening. I mean, so I definitely think as far as your target age ranges, far, or people my age, right, like 24-year-olds that played the first JellyCar when they were like 9 is probably a large portion of the people on TikTok. I also do think that TikTok and like YouTube Shorts and those types of like the short form stuff is just one of the better avenues for promoting your games in general in 2023.
I think if especially if you have a game that is really visually both like appealing in some way and like understandable visually, you know what I mean? Like some game types, I would imagine, like if I was making I don't know, like a tactical RPG or something where it's kind of turn-based and like the fun of the game is in the thinking you're doing about where you're going to place your characters and what you're going to equip them with and what attacks you're going to do and stuff. And that stuff doesn't really like come across on screen, very much. Like I would be like, oh, that's a bummer, because I would be struggling to make my game, interesting to turn into video or something, whereas other games like check out my third person, Unreal third person combat game with like flashy, like sword trails and VFX and like look at I dodge roll around a big enemy and then I smack them, like that stuff, like people, really visually can latch onto, so it does put like a weird bias, I think, on some game types, that like it's easier to market them in those mediums than others maybe.
I think so. Yeah, you've definitely. I mean, like you were talking about before, how your original intention for JellyCar was like sort of like notepad scribble sort of art style, and you talked about how in JellyCar 2 that they sort of didn't get that at first, and now with JellyCar Worlds, you've sort of like doubled down on that, and in a really nice polished way. Or I think you even put it in the forefront of your marketing in some sense, like on the Steam page. I think one of your headers is like advertises the fact that like the flipbook art style, and it has like a nice GIF animation, like flipping through it in that sort of way. And yeah, that's definitely like very instantly recognizable yet simple when you're coming across like a short video
and I mean,
ad. For
obviously,
sure.
like also if you just see a car get squished, like that's pretty. You don't see that every day.
Yeah, the
So
physics are
nice.
just like very niche and appealing on their own. Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm still definitely feeling like I need to, I don't know, learn more and do a better job on the marketing side for sure. That's probably the weakest link that I have right at the moment. So definitely going to make a conscious effort to do more of that. But streaming and constantly posting on social media has been both fun, so I don't mind doing it, but it is intentional, like it is. I'm trying to, trying to like grow some kind of something out of this thing. So
Yeah.
I need to do that. I mean, I don't stream that often. Like I know you generally stream longer
Oh yeah, I
and
live on
more.
Twitch.
Yeah, and like Tim Bodette, or like Lana Lux, or other examples.
Oh
I
yeah,
think
Tim probably has me beaten hours actually.
yeah,
Yeah,
Tim streams
he's
like
great.
basically full time. Like 12 hours a day
Oh
or
yeah,
whatever.
he's full time indie, and
Yeah,
he's on a good track. He's doing better than the vast majority for sure. Yeah, I'm actually planning on doing an interview with him as well when he releases his next Accelerate. He's doing a third Accelerate game.
Yeah, Accelerate to the Tropics, I think is what it's called.
Yeah,
I hang out.
I played his previous games on stream too. The other Accelerate games are they're a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. You say you have a lot to learn for the marketing, and that's probably true. But you're definitely off to a good start, especially like you talk about like recognizing the aspects of the game that make it more personable for like content creators and that type of thing. Another thing is another example would be like the fact that you have the ability to customize your own cars, like sketch your own little cars within the game is another great one too. Or I know like even on your stream you have like a channel point redeem where someone can like bug you to draw them a little car in yours. That's great. So
yeah, it's sort of
you're on the right track.
It takes me away from. I always I have like a running thing with Motzi Makes where like he always gives me crap about like being too focused on work during the stream and not like paying attention to chat or reading chat enough or being kind of as like sort of interactive with the chat. And then like he's kind of the opposite where like he gets distracted by chat and doesn't get anything done on his stream, so we always give each other crap about that. But that redemption is like the closest thing I have to that where I like don't get any work done because I stop and like draw a picture. But it is fun. So.
Yeah, it's kind of nice to have I've got some of those things on my stream as well where it's like spend a decent amount of stuff actually forces me to do something else for a couple of minutes. It's nice. So yeah, as far as the streaming experience working on the game, has the chat interaction and like feedback from people watching your stream played any sort of significant role on the developments?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, one thing is I'm a huge believer in play testing, and that like, you need to make the thing, and then you have got to just watch people play it and take notes and then revise it. I don't know how. I know there's some people who make games, but they don't do that. They just like make it all, in their lab, and then it comes out and it's amazing or whatever. But I can't do that. There's so much value in watching people play, and so it's been super useful both because I just have like people, right, like that hang out in the Twitch chat and then also in my Discord, and so I can kind of those can be playtesters, right? So when I have a build, they're like slightly more like trusted people that I know, and I can get the build in front of them, and they're nice enough that they'll take the time to like record their screen or whatever and send it to me or something like that, so I can actually like just watch people play. So of course that's super valuable, and just having Twitch and a Twitch chat and a Discord means it's easier for me to do that with people that are spread out around the world. But also but like suggestions and stuff that come in during chat are really cool. Like especially I really like it when I'm doing level design. Because when I'm messing around with level design, it's a super like iterative process, right? You're just kind of like, oh, well, what if we made a little section like this or like that, and you try it out, and those are the most interactive sessions because then it's really easy to like make suggestions because you're like looking at the thing I just made and going like, well, what if you did this? What if you did that? And a lot of times that turns into, you know, much better ideas. Like even just was it like a couple nights ago, I was like working on a new level and I was kind of stuck on it. I was like, I don't know about this. I had like these 3 ideas, but they weren't that interesting. They weren't that great. They were they were like the kind of thing where the idea is cool, but then in execution it gets like confusing or kind of sloppy or like, you know, it doesn't really produce the interaction I was hoping for because it has all these like side effects or whatever. And then um like people were making some suggestions and stuff, and so I kind of like set the level aside and tried a few other new ideas, some of which I had come up with in the moment and some of which were inspired by what Chad had said, and then ended up like just spiraling into this whole new idea for the level that was way better than, you know, how it had started. And so yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's hard to like quantify, you know, like, well, how different would it be if I hadn't been streaming that or if I hadn't had the chat there? Um, but I know it turned out good and it was fun and chat was a part of that. So it's awesome. You know, I really like that.
Yeah, I've heard similar sentiments expressed from all the other game dev streamers that I've talked to. That yeah, it's just nice having that really quick loop of feedback. I mean, yeah, almost kind of like similar to like how we were talking about game jams earlier. And yeah, I've definitely experienced the same sort of stuff as well for my MMO and my other games, especially when it comes to like minor UI details and small things that maybe just I'll overlook, but some random person will point out. So, yeah. Did you for JellyCar Worlds, was that a solo project as well, or was there any official collaboration with any other devs or anything?
It was. I mean, it's essentially a solo project. I have so there's a composer who makes all the music, who made actually the same person made the music for the original JellyCar games, and then now for JellyCar Worlds, which is super cool. Yeah, and so that's really cool. His name is Matt McCarthy, and he was just like reached out to me back on the XNA forums when I was making the original JellyCar and offered to make some music for the first one, and he turned out to be amazing and made perfect music for the first one, and then so the music is actually kind of a big part of it. I think when people get nostalgic for the game, part of it is the music that they remember, you know, because it's like it just fits the game really well. It's really memorable. And so anyway, you know, he made a bunch of new songs for the new one, which is super cool. So I didn't do anything with the music. And then I had a little bit of help from a 2D illustrator artist to do some of the like icons and things in the game, like, you know, like the like mode select or something, there's like an icon that represents, you know, playing the main game or going to the settings or going to the car customizer and stuff like those the artwork on those types of places are like the little icons that represent things in the game and stuff. I had an artist help me with, and I'm very glad I did because it's just way better than what I would have been able to do. But other than that, it's pretty much me. Like I did all the coding, all the level design, all the graphics, all the sound effects, all the, you know, save, load, the drawing tool in the game, the sound recording feature, you know, all that stuff. Yeah.
Cool. Wow, that's impressive. That's awesome that you got to work with the original musician as well. It's always cool when I've kind of had a similar experience with RetroMMO, where a lot of the people that ended up like me hiring them to work on stuff are people that initially just sort of started submitting things on their own accord without even having any sort of official communication. It's yeah, I mean, I get the idea that across your entire game dev career, you've you can see the passion for sure. So that's always a good feeling. I mean, I guess there's just a lot of that in the software and game development category on Twitch in general, for sure.
Yeah, I suppose you probably have to be in that category of people who really enjoy it if you're gonna go the extra mile and stream it.
Right? Yeah. Probably, and yeah, like make devlogs and that sort of thing. I've watched a bit of your YouTube channel as well. I love how you have. There was one video you posted. Maybe like a couple months back, where you like really went into depth explaining the physics of JellyCar. I thought that was really cool. Yeah, you've sort of done a good job of like posting out striking that middle ground between like finding your audience with the old JellyCar fans, but also a little bit of stuff here and there for the developers that you've picked up along the way.
Yeah, and I mean that's not really like a strategy. It's just like this is the only content I can make. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah, sure,
I'm
yeah.
spending all day just like working on the game. So like if there's something about the making of the game that I can share or talk about or something, then I can make that. So that's
Yeah.
what I'll make. You know what I mean? So yeah. But I mean I really enjoy it. Like I really like sharing and like just talking about how things are made. And I was happy that I finally took the time to just like sit down and make the video explaining the not it's not like a tutorial, it's not like here's how you code the physics of JellyCar, but it's kind of like if you're paying attention, I basically explained all of it. You know what I mean? Like you
Yeah.
could make it yourself. You'd have to figure out the code, but like all the, you know, I'm not hiding anything, or I'm not purposely trying to, I don't know, keep it to myself or anything. And it was a fun video to make. It was, I'm glad that one's out there. Hopefully it'll sort of just, people will find it over time and find it useful.
Yeah, the reason I appreciate videos like that so much is because it's so difficult to make a video that feels informative and entertaining for both the dev and like the casual viewer. And I get the idea that a video like that, where it's sort of it doesn't necessarily go into the code, and maybe it does have a bit of like in-depth information about some of the math and physics behind it, but it's to a like palatable degree that maybe someone who's not a game dev could still get something out of it. So. Yeah, and it's hard to make that kind of content. Like I think devloggers on YouTube are all trying to chase that sort of thing, and sometimes you hit and sometimes you miss. For
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. I think in an alternate reality, I would be like one of those like science show kids show hosts.
Oh
I
yeah.
think like I think there's a little part of me that would be like they would want like would be good at that, and it would like that would be a fun job to have, like a one of those like I remember when I was little, what was it called? What was it? There was a show called Beekman's World, with like the wacky guy who would like explain, science stuff.
Yeah, or
Or like
something like Bill Nye
like
or something. That
yeah,
sort of
yeah,
deal.
yeah,
Yeah. I get what you
yeah,
mean.
yeah.
Yeah, I've saw like on your stream and your YouTube and stuff, you made some videos and things about how you do these like little Rubik's Cube-esque puzzles and like 3D printing
Oh yeah,
like
yeah.
hardware
I'm
sort of things as
surrounded by
well,
them
which
over
is
here.
sort of aligns with that.
Yeah, like there towards the end of working where I wasn't indie, um, and I didn't have like side projects or anything. I kind of got like super into 3D printing and designing weird things that you could 3D print. And one of the things that you can kind of make with just a 3D printer, and you don't need anything else, is like Rubik's Cube style puzzles, because they're basically just cleverly shaped pieces of plastic that like slide together, to make the
Mm-hmm.
thing work. And so it was very accessible. Like you could just come up with an idea and like use the software to make it and then print it out and like assemble it, So I got like pretty distracted by making stuff like that for like a year. Made a bunch of
Yeah.
fun little things.
That's awesome. Well, coming up on the tail end of all the prepared notes that I have for you, I wanted to, as like a final prepared question, I wanted to ask you, I guess, as far as future updates for JellyCar World. I saw you actually dropped a free one today. It's like a small content update. I was curious about what is your plan for future updates for the game? Will they all be free, or will there be some paid aspect? And I'm also just curious about what you're going to be working on going forward, unrelated to JellyCar.
Yeah. Yeah, the near term is all jelly shaped. So like the next like probably year, I think I'm just gonna mostly be updating JellyCar. And it'll be the plan is that it's all free updates. Like my goal is to just keep updating the game and adding stuff to it and make it more and more attractive. And each time I update it, hopefully a few more people find out about it, and I just kind of keep selling copies of it. That's my current grand plan.
Gotcha.
So the game came out, and there was the game shows you that there's room for 8 worlds of content, but there were 6 actually in the game when it released, and then that was in December. And then literally today, the first major update to the game came out. It wasn't just bug fixes or something, and it added World 7, which so a whole new world with a new car ability and 8 levels that all have like secret exits and challenges and things, and then the one extra hard level. And so it's like a whole little chunk of content. And so then the obvious thing I'm going to do next is World 8, which was like very clearly communicating the game that it was planned. Like
Yeah.
they say coming soon, and 7 is there now, but 8 is still coming soon. So that will be the next thing. And then in my mind, that kind of will be the end of the main kind of like play through it in order world adventure like main content of the game. And then I want to start adding other modes that aren't just more levels tacked on to the end, but are sort of different things you can do in the game. So the most obvious one is a level editor.
Yeah. I was about to ask.
It's like, yeah, everyone asks for it, although I think they even like ask for it disproportionately in JellyCar compared to maybe, your average game. And I think it makes sense, like it's a physicsy kind of game where you can really imagine that you could play around with it and, really make lots of different things with it. It seems like very, like there's a lot of possibilities, and it doesn't seem, I think, particularly intimidating, right? It's more just like, well, you just kind of put some objects around and then drive on top of it. So I'm expecting that after World 8, I'll focus on a level editor, and then I'll get out some kind of V1 of the level editor, but I'll probably have updates that expand it or add functionality or sort of react to what people want to do with it and that kind of stuff. And then I still want to do some other things. Like I have one other weird little side mode in the game, which is the long jump mode. So it's not part of the main level progression, but there's just this little mode where you just go down a little ramp and get shot in the air, and then you see how far you can jump. And as you play through the main game, you unlock more power-ups that you can kind of use. Like once you get the balloon, like you can float, for low ways, and if you use it smart, you can float quite far, and then eventually you get the rocket, and so you get like one use of each power-up basically. And
Yeah, I feel like I've played similar sort of Flash games or mobile games to this in the past. Is that where your inspiration comes from? Other stuff you've played for that?
Yeah, and I like the structure of it because it's more replayable, than the main content. It's still not forever replayable. You know what I mean? Like you will kind of eventually like jump pretty far and be like, okay, like I'm not gonna beat that, But it's more kind of evergreen and replayable than the main levels are, which are a little more like, they have 3 or 4 things you can do in them, but once you've done all those things, there's not a lot of reason to go back to them. And so I want to add a few more of those, like a few more modes that are a bit more kind of arcade replayable kind of things into the game. And then we'll see, like some kind of local multiplayer might be fun, like a race mode or something. I'm not going to do online because I'm not an expert at online things in the first place, and physics synced over a network is, just kind of beyond what I should probably do. But I could probably do local, so maybe it's like split screen or a race or like co-op levels or something like that. Might be kind of fun.
You could use like the Steam remote play perhaps for that sort of thing as well.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. That's what we did on Very Very Valet also, which is a multiplayer, or it's like a couch co-op game. And that one you can play online if you use like Steam remote play or like Parsec or something like that. But yeah, so I have tons of stuff I want to add to the game. I'm thinking I might find a way to get the old levels from the old games and like import them in and have like a classic level section. So that would be like a cool thing to add as well. And that's kind of nice because I don't have to make new levels, I just need to make the old levels play well in the new engine. So yeah. And then I don't know, like next game wise, what's going on. It'll be a little while, I think, before I start planning on it. I mean, maybe at some point I will no longer be able to resist making the nerdy programming shadery thing I was talking about earlier. But that would have to be more like a side thing where I just kind of work on it a little bit at a time and then put it out there with low expectations. But I don't know what to do next after that. I got to think a little bit about, I don't know. One thing that's kind of weird about me, I don't know if I don't think you're this way because I think RetroMMO is this for you. But like, I don't really have that like one game, that I've always wanted to make. That's my big, like dream game. I don't know if I think it's kind of rare. I think a lot of people do have that, and that's why they want to like make games because they have like this, vision for a certain game. And I've never had that, so it's always just been like kind of discovering games that I'm interested in, then I make them. And so it's a little hard to know what will come next. Like maybe I'll have some JellyCar style inspiration and I'll be like, oh, now I know what I'm making next. I'm making this weird, like, I don't know, underwater scuba diving game or whatever, because suddenly I think that's interesting or something. Or, or I need to think a little more smartly about like, well, I made a game known for its squishy physics, and there still aren't very many games that have that. Like, maybe I should make another game that's kind of, not JellyCar, but kind of, in the same space, to sort of capitalize on the awareness, or sort of like, people know me for that kind of game, so maybe they'd be more inclined to, buy my next game if it's seems like something they're going to recognize, or already think they'll like, or whatever. I don't know. I don't know how much to think that way versus just try to follow, general inspiration or whatever. So I don't know. But luckily, I don't have to think about it for a little while. I can just have fun updating the current game.
Yeah, it sounds like you got some great plans for JellyCar. Yeah, for RetroMMO, it's something I've always been super passionate about and super excited about, because I actually played there was a very similar game to RetroMMO years and years ago that I played a ton in high school, actually. Like, I put at least a couple thousand hours into it, but it was the developer sort of disappeared. It was like a fundraiser, like a Kickstarter-esque rug pull sort of thing. So I felt pretty motivated to like iterate on that. And I have there's one other game idea I have as well, which is a similar sort of situation where it was a concept for a game format that just wasn't taken as far as I'd love to see. And but yeah, I definitely want to try a bunch of random ideas and see what sticks as well. But yeah, it is kind of nice having a project that I feel like I can just sort of infinitely grind on. I mean, I guess it's also a curse in some sense, because it's just always on my mind, and that's that's stressful.
Yeah,
but it's nice.
Yeah. I mean, I have a to-do list in my head at all times. Like,
yeah,
I get in the car and start driving. I'm like, okay, so what should I do next? Like, okay, so maybe, I could do this. What should I, and I'm just constantly, I can't help it. Like, I can't turn it off. Like, the what should I do next? What's my priorities? Like, oh, don't forget about this. Like, oh, I should do that. Like it just never stops. Although actually, I just realized when we were talking, there's like my closest thing to your retro MMO thing is there is. I mean, technically this game still exists, but it's this game called Tory Bash. You've probably never heard of it.
Don't know it. Yeah.
So Tory Bash is this game that I played, I don't even know, back in like 2006. And it's like a fighting game, but the point of the game is you have like a ragdoll character standing there, and all you actually like adjust the joints. So like you would hover the mouse over the elbow, let's say, and then you can switch the elbow between like contracting or expanding or just staying wherever it is right now. So if you want to punch someone, you don't say like press the punch button. You like literally select the shoulder and rotate it forward, and then select the elbow and extend it, and then like that causes a punch to happen. And so anyway, what you do is you plan all the joints, and then you like press the space bar, and it steps forward in time a little bit, and then pauses again, and then lets you fiddle with the joints again, and then so it's kind of like this quasi turn-based, like physics-based fighting game. And that game has always just been like left this impression on me where I'm like, I don't actually really want to make a fighting game. I just want that mechanism, and I want to make my game that uses that mechanism of the like joints, pause time, adjust the joints, move forward in time thing. And like I have my own vision for like what I would make with that like core interaction, and it wouldn't be a one-on-one like fighting game. It would be something different, and so I'm like, that's probably the closest thing where I'm like, I've always wanted to make that game. At some point I'll probably have to make my version of that game, but I haven't got around to it yet. Maybe that'll be the next one. I don't know. It's a really cool game.
Yeah, that'd be fun. It almost sounds like sort of co-op-esque, like I heard talking about earlier. Maybe
yeah,
not.
It's
tough
like
to visualize that
co-op
concept.
Yeah, it's like stop motion's co-op. Like imagine co-op paused, and you could decide how you want to move the legs, and then it would go, and then it would pause again, and then you could decide how you want to move the legs. It's like it's almost like you're stop motion animating the character. It's super clever, and it's like almost no game has done anything with that besides Tory Bash. It's just like this one singular game, and
Interesting.
I love it, but I've always been a little bit like it's like very violent, like you can like dismember each other and stuff, and like that's not really my thing. So like I've always kind of felt like I just want to make my version of the game that takes that like core mechanic and like takes it in a different direction, but it's still very clearly like drawing strong inspiration from that game. Um, yeah, maybe that'll be the next one. We'll see. I don't know. But
Gotcha.
that's probably my retro MMO. In terms of like, had this game that I
Yeah.
love, but it's also like I have a vision for a version of it that's a little different.
Yeah, I know. It sucks to see a great concept go unexplored. For sure, for sure. Uh well, I'll definitely be keeping up with everything that you put out. I was hoping to actually play JellyCar Worlds before this interview, but I haven't had a chance to yet. Maybe I will sometime
Yeah,
soon.
the new update's out, so now's the best
There
time
you
ever.
go. Yeah.
Hop in there, check it out.
Well,
uh,
yeah. I encourage everyone check it out. You can go to Walaber's site, walaber.com, WALABER.com, or probably just Google JellyCar Worlds. It's on Steam, it's on mobile, it's on Switch, and yeah, I guess we can go ahead and wrap up here. If you have any final thoughts, anything that you had really hoped to mention, or but before we
no,
before
but
we cut it
actually,
here.
yeah, please Google it, because
Oh yeah, the
like
SEO.
well, yeah, because like there's a brand that's like plushies or something called JellyCat. And so for a long time, if you typed in JellyCar, because JellyCar is all one word, it doesn't have a space between jelly and car, which maybe was a
Right.
mistake. But so if you type it in like, JELLYCAR, Google will be like, did you mean JellyCat? And it'll give you results for JellyCat. And it's always like, no, I meant JellyCar. Come on. So we need all the people we can get to search for JellyCar to convince Google that they meant JellyCar. And it's a popular thing and they should stop autocorrecting for JellyCat. That would be great.
I see.
But no,
So,
yeah. Thanks for having me. This is super great. I really appreciate it. This was fun.
of course, yeah, no, thank you so much. This has been super interesting. This might be the longest interview I've done yet, actually, perhaps. But yeah, no, this has been fantastic. Yeah, you have super long history in the game dev industry. Your passion definitely shows. Awesome stuff, man. Myself having played one of your games, playing your breakthrough game when I was just a wee MMO. Yeah, super cool coming full circle and getting to have a chat. So yeah, thank you to all the listeners, to all the viewers. This was recorded live on twitch.tv/EvanMMO, as all episodes of this are, of course. And yeah, thank you so much, everybody. That's a wrap. Peace.
Thanks.